I think the problem for any club sort of trying to catch Liverpool or City, and this is the same in the continent, is that, the best two managers are Guardiola and Klopp, and you can't get them, and they are head and shoulders really above everyone else. So, and you look at the sort of candidates out there, there are actually quite a few people available, like Nagelsmann's available, Tuchel's available, Potter's available, but for one reason or another, people might think they're flawed or whatever. I think if you've got a good structure and you're a club that can invest, which, let's be honest, in time, if United are successful, they absolutely will be able to, then, it's all there to be successful. It is the complete opposite of a compact football team, and I can't understand the logic of that because I've never seen anything like that before.
Jay here from Stretford Paddock, and this is the Tier 1 podcast. Joining me, as always, is Mr. Joe Smith. Joe, how are we doing?
I'm very well, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, man, because we've got a good guest with us today. We've got James Ducker from the Telegraph, the Northern football correspondent. James, it's been a little while, actually, since you've been on the channel.
No, you've been begging me for a while.
I know, I have been begging you. I have, honestly. I've been doing that message like, you right, bro, how's it going? Yeah, you busy lately? You'll be like, yeah. I'm like, all right, no worries, speak to you soon. But you have come on, and it's good to talk to you as well, because there's quite a lot happening in there. In the world of Manchester United. Not much of it positive, but there's a lot of changes afoot, so we'll get into all that, what's going down with INEOS and all that stuff. So make sure as well you are hitting like, share and subscribe, and go and check out James Ducker's work at the Telegraph. There's a link in the description. I want to talk a little bit about, obviously, INEOS. Now, Omar Barada is obviously coming in. Dan Ashworth, we keep hearing that that's going to happen anytime soon. What's the sort of latest with the sort of the changes that we can expect above the managerial level at the minute?
Well, Barada, as you know, is appointed in January. He'll start in the summer. I'm not got a sort of specific date yet. I think that's still to be fully ironed out, but he's obviously got gardening leave period. Dan Ashworth, I expect obviously to join as director of football. Sir Jim Ratcliffe has obviously been pretty vocal about what he thinks about their compensation bill that Newcastle are after, which is around 20 million they've been asking for, which is just a negotiating tactic, I think. I mean, as many people point out, they paid, it's been reported as about 4 million, but I think it was about 2 million that they paid Brighton to get Ashworth out in February 2022. And then he started at the beginning of June, so that was 4 months or so later. Probably going to cost United more than 2 million, but obviously 20 million is an outlandish figure. And I think once Newcastle get their own new sporting director in, the idea of them paying two people is probably going to be a bit unpalatable for them. So I do expect that to happen. Clearly, this is a big summer for the football club, and in an ideal world, Dan Ashworth would be in situ now and working, but I think they'll be keen to try and get him in as soon as possible. When that'll be, I don't know. If it ends up being the sort of start of the summer like Barada, then I think, United will probably be happy with that. And then beyond that, as a sort of writing this week, is they're looking at bringing in a sort of a technical director who obviously will have a very big recruitment bent, and then a performance director who sort of will oversee sort of that physical and physiological sort of lead, nutrition, medical side, strength and conditioning, sort of have an overview on that. So you could get sort of 4 senior appointments. I was sort of told this week, look, these things are not written in sort of tablets of stone, but that's very much what they're pursuing at the moment. That's the setup that they want. And I think from a United fan point of view, the big change, the step change there is that these are all external appointments with a track record in the game. Someone like Barada's obviously seen best in class, up close and personal at Manchester City. Dan Ashworth has done he's a pretty impressive sort of career, FA, Brighton, Newcastle in the main. Jason Wilcox, who's the Southampton director of football, previously at City, he was their academy chief, very good, really highly rated. They're looking seriously at him. So I think that in itself, you've probably seen over the years this talk of resets, well, it's really just a status quo sort of packaged up as change. Whereas now, you know, you are seeing external people coming in, and you're going to see a lot of people losing their jobs, I think, at Manchester United over the next sort of 12, 18 months. But I think there's meaningful change there.
Because one thing that we were talking about here is that, I know you said there's going to be some people losing their jobs, but so far, obviously Richard Arnold's gone as CEO and he's been replaced by another CEO, but a lot of it is new roles, isn't it? New people. Like, what was the sort of the through line from the manager to the owners for the last decade? And obviously the person in particular has changed, with it being Woodward or Arnold, but it feels like we're adding like 4 or 5 steps in, almost like this sort of hierarchy of competency that we didn't seem to have at all until now. Is that changing, or is it just the wording's different?
No, I think that's right. I think there's a change. I mean, I've used this phrase before, but the Glazers have effectively outsourced the football club to a minority shareholder in Jim Ratcliffe. It's a minority deal that's not a minority deal in a way. I mean, I know there's obviously huge campaigning for a full takeover. Well, this is as close as you're going to get to a full takeover without having one. And I think they're being distressed by sort of the structure and the setup previously, and a change in that. So you'd have a technical director and a performance director reporting into Dan Ashworth. You know, the manager reported into the director of football and the CEO, in having that sort of strong triumvirate of people. It's interesting, they've made a lot of mistakes at Nice, and they're very honest actually about that. I'm actually quite surprised at how honest they are. I mean, they've been on record saying we've made a lot of stupid mistakes, but I think they've realised the importance of having the right coach, the right sporting director, the right CEO, and then a couple of other important senior people around. And they've slowly started to obviously make the right decisions there. And I think United may benefit from that. I think they've obviously had I don't call it a dummy run, but they've had a go at the actual ins and outs of the workings at a football club for 4 or 5 years now. And I do think that will put them on a far better footing than if they hadn't had it. Now, clearly they're taking over probably with Real Madrid and Barcelona, the most scrutinised football club in the world. You know, the Dan Ashworth Tonali transfer at Newcastle, could you imagine the reaction if he'd been the director of football and signed Tonali, and 6 months later or whatever it is, he's banned from playing because of a betting problem, or alleged betting problem. So, you know, that went not under the radar, of course, but the coverage of it is very, very different to what it would be obviously United. So they're aware of that. I think Jim Ratcliffe sort of, you know, INEOS, he says, wasn't it like the biggest company no one's ever heard of? Well, everyone's heard of INEOS now. But I think the people I think Ashworth's a smart approach. Barada worked very, very closely on transfers with Cheeky Bagiristan at Manchester City, heavily involved in the Erling Haaland deal. Obviously been at Barcelona previously. I think he'll bring a lot of expertise, be ruthless. I think Brailsford and Ratcliffe and Jean-Claude Blanc and the setup generally is, they say you can make a mistake, but you can't make the same mistake twice. Well, United for the last 10 years have made the same mistake dozens of times, over and over again, and never learned. So I think, I mean, he said obviously this sort of 3-year plan. I mean, I think if they get every summer transfer window right, they clear out the deadwood and they really do overhaul that squad, you know, and they have the right manager and stuff, then I'm not saying they'll win the title in 3 years, but, you know, things could look very, very different on the pitch by that point to what they do now. But there is an awful lot to get right, and I think they've got a huge amount to unravel. I mean, you look at that squad, I mean, how many players would you keep? 6, 7? In
a dream world where you could actually replace the ones you get rid of, it's probably 5 or 6.
Yeah. So there's a lot of work to do there. Obviously, if they don't get in the Champions League, you know, don't get out of the groups. I mean, the group stage alone's worth about 40 million to you. If you get to the quarterfinals, which United always budget for every season, then that's anything between 65 and 75.
How have we got away with budgeting for that every season? By the way,
don't know. It's
because we've done
We've
the
done
last
that
decade.
once in the last 11 years or something.
It's strange. I mean, like it used to be under Ferguson, obviously, that the budget every season.
That's fair enough.
Yeah, and they got to 3 finals in 4 years. Towards the end, I mean, they were generally there. I was actually quite surprised by that because obviously just as all this profit and sustainability rules talk, I was just quite interested, certainly when they went out and they said, oh no, we still budget for the quarterfinals at that point. So, I mean, it's
insane.
I know.
Well, I'm surprised they even budget to be in the Champions League.
Yeah, even that's not a given. Let alone get into the quarterfinals. We did it. Was it once under Ole?
Yeah.
And that's been it.
Yeah.
I think
they did under Moyes.
Yeah. So
twice in 10 years.
That's. I mean, it's ambitious. So maybe someone would call it deluded.
But they need. I mean, I can't see it, but they need to be in it from a financial, obviously, point of view, and obviously they've spent a lot of money in recent years. So there's challenges. There's certainly a lot of challenges this summer ahead.
Yeah.
And I don't. I think if people see a completely new hierarchy running the shop, and the people who presided over the mess previously are gone, then I think there will be a patience in sort of understanding. It's a pretty patient, loyal supporter base, the regular match going support United. And I don't think anyone thinks there's a quick fix there. I mean, just simply unravelling that squad, you can't do that in one summer. You know, I mean, there's quite a lot of work there.
With everything you've said then, I mean, the obvious question is, where does Erik Ten Hag fit in all this? Where do you think his future lies? Because you talk about changes and the hierarchy and the squad, even a lot of the players he's bought.
He's sandwiched between all that.
Yeah, he's obviously having involved in a season where, you know, I've obviously been very supportive of Erik Ten Hag, but we've lost 11 league games and we're in March. I mean, and a lot of those games have been at Old Trafford as well, which is even more difficult to take. What are you sort of feelings, or what do you think INEOS' feelings are towards Erik Ten Hag? Is he still on probation almost, or do you think they might be sort of looking one way or the other already?
Yeah, I mean, look, his position is under serious threat. You know, he is in serious doubt. There's no getting away from that. Have they actually already made a decision on it? It wouldn't surprise me if they have, but I don't know. But I don't know the answer to that yet.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked obviously off there about this. I don't think it's an easy club. It's not been an easy club to work for in lots of ways, because you primarily because you've not had maybe the expertise and the structure around you that you would want. So I'd say if you look at sort of the two benchmarks, Liverpool and City, they've obviously got the best two managers, and that can sort of mask a multitude of sins. But they've got a good structure around them. You know, the recruitment's good, they're decisive, they're ruthless. I always say with City, I mean, like, you know, Aguero, they looked at it and they just got rid of him. United had given him a 5-year contract.
100%.
Raheem Sterling, we'll sell you to Chelsea we paid 44 for you, we'll sell you for 47.5. We'll back ourselves there, and we'll sell him. Gabriel and Zinchenko, they sell to Arsenal, who are obviously now title rivals, and they're not worried about, is that going to come back to bite me? They're brave. I mean, Cole Palmer, they obviously sell to Chelsea. I didn't agree with that decision. I thought it was a majorly talented player and would fit nicely into that team, but anyway, they've done it. And it's a total opposite of what it's been at United. It's like, you know, for years they sweated over, oh yeah, but what happens if we sell Paul Pogba and he goes and does something well? Well, Paul Pogba barely played for United in the last couple of seasons, did he? And then he's barely played since, and look what's happened now. What did Jesse Lingard go on to do? None of these players go on to do anything, because they should have been shipped out ages ago. But even if they did, you know, back yourselves to move on from them. And they've just obviously not done things like that. So I think, obviously, going back to Ten Hag, there's not it's not been a great structure to around him at all. It's been a lousy one, but he's had so much his way, and obviously a lot of the players that have been brought, all the players that have been brought to the club, effectively talked about outsourcing the Glazers outsourcing to Ratcliffe, the club to Ratcliffe. Well, transfers effectively been put in the manager's lap, and there's been all sorts of strange decisions, and all the criteria they set themselves have invariably reneged on. So yeah, he's it's not been pretty this season. I think beyond all the transfers, the questions of man management and all that, I think though the way his team is set up and how erratic they are, in that you don't know what's going to come from one half to the next, let alone from 1 week to the next, doesn't augur particularly well for him.
You always mention this, don't you, about there's this debate amongst United fans. We've had it on this channel countless times. Are they listening to him, or is it him telling them to play this way? Because it's not working, and you can see it. You mentioned the Fulham game, which was a prime example of something that's not.
That's the one thing everyone agrees on, is that it's shit. But whose fault is it that it's shit? Is it that he's not the manager we thought he was, he's changed from what we thought he was, or the players aren't listening to him? I mean, obviously it doesn't help if the players aren't listening to him, because part of a manager's job is to get the players to listen. Or is it that these players aren't capable of playing the style that we all first of maybe assumed that Ten Hag was going to bring in, because we're just not seeing it? So, what's your sort of estimation of why, not necessarily what we're seeing, but why it doesn't look like there's any plan? Or do you think that is the plan, and that the tactics that Ten Hag brought maybe aren't what a lot of fans thought he was going to bring?
Well, I honestly, Joe, couldn't tell you what the plan is in terms of how I say. I can tell you what Ten Hag says he wants and stuff, but I couldn't, if I watching that team, I couldn't tell you what they're supposed to be, or what I think they're supposed to be from watching them. Yeah. I think, look, if you have a starting base that the squad's not good enough to win the title, you accept that. I mean, the squad is not good enough to win the title, but the squad should absolutely be good enough to finish comfortably in the top four. I mean, so they played Brighton early in the season and they lost 3-1. Well, that team, I think there was only one player in it that deserved. I think there was only one player that Zerbi had signed in that starting 11. Yeah. The team cost about £17 million. It was made up of loanees and free transfers, and yet the manager has got them all literally dancing to his tune, doing exactly what he wants. Now, clearly, a team of loanees and free signings and stuff, they're going to have wobbles, they're going to have struggles. Are they going to be good enough, a Brighton team, to sustain it over a 38-game season all the time? Brilliant. No, but they routinely punch hugely above the weight, and there's a great structure and stuff to them. I can't believe that you can't fashion a very high-functioning unit out of those United players. Are they good enough to win the title? No. Are they better than Liverpool and City and Arsenal? No. But you could be getting a lot more out of them than you are. And I think I sort of look at that side. Obviously, he's referenced about injuries a lot, but there's huge disconnects all over the team, and there's this. I mean, Carragher highlighted it, didn't he, after the Fulham game on Monday Night Football? I mean, quite a lot of us have been writing about this in detail all season, but there is a huge gap between where the defence starts and where the press starts, and it has this strange construct where he presses high but defends with a low block, and it is the complete opposite of a compact football team, and I can't understand the logic of that, because I've never seen anything like that before, and I don't understand how you expect to be successful like that. So there's an issue there, and you could have all your fully fit, you could have all your players fully fit over the course of a season, and you would think that setup is still going to hold you back. Yeah, it's still going to be a bit of an anchor. Yeah, and then obviously you have injuries, and you add it, and it's pronounced. for me, that's obviously the most glaring issue, and I think that's something that INEOS and the new United hierarchy will be looking very closely at. There's other things. For me, it's like the repeat naivety, the repeat failed game management. So, how many times this season have you seen 4 or 5 players beyond the ball over-committing an attack, and then there's this huge 30-yard space for teams to counter? So it happened against Galatasaray, it happened against Wolves when, for the first half, actually probably the best performance of the season at Molineux, and then chaos after that.
I thought they were really good in that first half.
Yeah, they played really well. So there's been a lot of that, and then things like, real naivety. I mean, the Galatasaray game, 2-0 up, should be out of sight, and then McTominay messes up a cross. There's 5 men behind the ball. They get counter-attack, concede a free kick on the edge of the box, and they concede. I mean, there's been a lot of goals or a lot of incidents conceded like this. And then finally, sorry, Joe, I know you want to ask, but the naivety element, the inability to manage situations, the Fulham winner. So the opposition have got to throw in deep by the United tunnel in their own half, and managed to, Lindelof's in no man's land. I think it was a Garnacho who sort of trying to press 2 players. They get it up. Maguire doesn't beat Muniz in the air. It's laid off. And Traore skips past 2 players with ease, and the through. And it's, I mean, things like that poor game management, you've seen that time and again. And players have to take responsibility. Of course they do. But if it's happening time and again, players are overcommitting, the management of games is poor regularly, then why is that not being corrected? Why is that not being addressed? And I think those sort of questions are really, really alarming, and they don't reflect well on the manager.
Do you think the owners, the new owners in particular, because I think the old owners look at the sort of league table and that's pretty much it in terms of whether they keep a manager or not? I assume that the likes of Ratcliffe and particularly Brailsford and Barada will be looking at these structures and how United are actually playing. Do you think they're getting worried by this? Do you think they are, obviously they want United to do well and he's not their man, so it won't be too much for him to sack him? I don't think that's very feasible. Do you think they're looking at it going, this doesn't work, mate, this isn't going to work? Do you think they're asking him, or do you think it's sort of a, we've got to make a decision here?
I don't know exactly what is being discussed between the two of them. Between INEOS and Ten Hag. Obviously, constantly Ten Hag saying we're on the same page and various other things. I mean, I suspect there's going to be an element of keeping the cards close to the chest and not fully revealing the hand. It's always that delicate balance, isn't it, that has to be struck. I mean, ultimately, these decisions will, fall on Barada and Ashworth, say Wilcox, and if they were all in situ now, they would be, and I'm sure. Well, I know that the Bradas and Ashworths, I'm sure, are having conversations sort of behind the scenes. But, in Brailsford and Jean-Claude Blanc and people like that are obviously there to sort of bring these people together. They're obviously on the football club board. They'll be sounding boards. But Dave Brailsford, by his own admission, is not an expert on football, hence why they want experts who've seen it and know what they're doing in place to make those decisions. And that, again, is one of the issues here, is that whole setup is not in situ yet. And sort of, I think my feedback that I'm getting is that, these are decisions for those people to make. But, Ratcliffe will have an opinion, and Brailsford and Jean-Claude Blanc will have an opinion, no doubt. And Barada's been part of a setup at City that is ruthless. I mean, he's obviously on record about this. If a signing doesn't work out, he's like, got to get rid of him within 12 months. They're not people that, are going to be overly sentimental or sympathetic. It's not under 14s grassroots football. It's the absolute sort of top end of the game, and You know, it's not a tea party, and they're expected to win, and they're expected to win well. So I think you can get really, really bogged down dissecting United. If you actually step back from it, if you step back from it and look at it, it's a sea of shit, isn't it? I mean, like the I mean,
that's one way of putting it, isn't it?
But yeah, I mean, it's like, but if you watch that game on Sunday, I mean, listening to Ten Hag discuss that game afterwards, you know, was deeply uncomfortable. Yeah, you know, and you're watching it, and there's two teams playing different sports. I mean, there's plenty of ways to skin a cat, different ways to skin a cat, but I mean that they were playing two sports in effect, and it's things like, I mean, I watched them and it's like City ping ping ping, every pass is punched, the first touch is immaculate. Watch United, the passes are scuffed, bobbled. Players have to check their runs all the time because a pass is just half a yard behind them, so they have to take another touch. And it's the attention to detail of those things. I thought things like that would really improve under Ten Hag. I thought, like, the one thing United, question marks over, could he manage a huge dressing room? Could he deal with the scrutiny of the football club? Is he a good enough communicator? You know, all these things. But the one thing I think people thought they were going to get was a coach who developed players and could set up a team. But you look at that squad, and there's a lot of players who've gone backwards. There's a lot of players who've still got the same faults that have not necessarily improved. And obviously there's questions that we've discussed over the setup. And I think those sort of things are concerning. But yeah, I thought there'd be a lot more players that would have improved, you know. And I think there are players there that are capable of improving. And it will be interesting in different hands to see what they might become. But then, you know, the collective just seems to be so flawed at times that no one can ever really escape it.
You mentioned Zerbi earlier, the Brighton game. Now he sort of was able to imprint his sort of methods straight into that team, and there was a piece, I think it was Mike McGrath in the Telegraph, talking about he's got a buyout clause, a compensation clause of 12 million, and people putting two and two together and saying maybe United could pay that and get him in at Old Trafford under a different setup where the manager doesn't have carte blanche to do everything, because that might make sense. Could you see a move like that happening? Someone like a Zerbi who has a certain style, who's not as proven as most of the other managers who've come into Old Trafford have been, but would be working under a different structure than those managers were. So you might not need a Jose or a Van Gaal or a manager like that who wants a, you know, complete control over us.
You won't get that under the structure. Those days will not.
Yeah. So do you think a Zerbi, because someone like that might be
I mean, I look, I don't know who they're gonna. Yeah. I don't know for definite that, you know, Ten Hag will go. I don't know for definite who, you know, they're going to bring someone else in. I don't know for definite that they're going to who they want. I think, you know, coming weeks, months will obviously reveal that. I think the problem for any club sort of trying to catch Liverpool or City, you know, and this is the same in the continent, is that, you know, the best two managers are Guardiola and Klopp, and you can't get them, and they are head and shoulders really above everyone else. So, and you look at the sort of candidates out there, there are actually quite a few people available, like Nagelsmann's available, Tuchel's available, Potter's available, but for one reason or another, people might think they're flawed or whatever. But I think if you've got a good structure, and you know you're a club that can invest, which, you know, let's be honest, in time, if United are successful, they absolutely will be able to. Then, you know, it's all there to be successful. I do think you have to have pretty broad shoulders to sort of manage the club. But yeah, I mean, you know, De Zerbi's, it's clearly very talented. You look at what he's done with that Brighton team. I mean, he's a little bit volatile, isn't he, at times? I mean, how would he cope at a top club? Are the questions that we just don't know. I mean, like Graham Potter was a talented coach. I think during Chelsea, a very, very difficult time. And I think the difference, say, with Chelsea and United is that it's actually it's not chaos and volatile and everything behind the scenes at United. It's not been like, people throwing the toys out of the pram all the time and delinquent, crazy behaviour. It's not been that. It's just not been good enough.
Yeah.
There's just been a level of incompetence that is sort of held you back. But it's not a really hostile, awful environment to sort of be in. It's just not been that way. Whereas I think Chelsea's was probably a difficult sort of place to be. But again, I think that a coach would be expected to sort of work within a environment. Obviously, be demands on him, but I think what you would hopefully have, whoever the manager is that you'd have a recruitment setup whereby they are identifying exactly what they need and maybe identifying a different sort of profile of player than they've gone for. I mean, how many we were talking about it before, Joe? I mean, how few signings have been a success in the last 10 years?
Yeah. So a handful, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, undoubtedly a success is a few.
Do you think
2 or 3?
Just in terms of the manager then, and I know you said there's a few managers available, and there is a good number of managers available, but none of them who you would sort of look at as the next sort of Pep Guardiola or the next Klopp or whatever. Do you think we almost, and again, I hate to compare everything to Man City, but we're almost like following a similar kind of, I can't think of another team that's had such a club that's had such an overhaul above and behind the scenes other than Chelsea, but they went the wrong way with it, since City, really. Like what United are doing now is pretty unprecedented amongst top clubs. This, new owners and radically new sort of style across the board. Do you think we almost might be looking for the Mancini rather than the Pep? Because, because one of my issues with getting rid of Ten Hag, one is that I don't think we've truly seen what he can bring because of all the stuff we've mentioned before. But the other one I have is, who are you going to get? I don't think, Potter's good, but if you can't handle Chelsea, how are you going to handle United? Zerbi is notoriously volatile. He's never managed big players. He never stays anywhere more than 2 years. Like, the other options don't massively excite me either. But do you think the INEOS, who obviously looking at the options, do you think maybe they think, well, it doesn't need to be the bloke who stays there for 10 years, but they may be able to challenge with a Mancini or a Pellegrini before the next sort of Pep Guardiola comes along?
Yeah, I mean,
that's an option.
The analogy is very good. It's sometimes you've got to take several steps before you get there, and it might be that guy is there, and it's not immediately apparent to any of us, but he could grow into that. I think they may resolve that. With better signings and more guy and a bit stricter sort of criteria and laying out what we do and don't like and what we expect, that they think, for now Ten Hag is okay for us for now. Equally take the view that they don't, but I do think they talk generally that, I remember when Soriano came into City and he said that the natural cycle for a head coach really is around about 3 years. I think when you get people like Klopp and Guardiola, they are sort of freaks, and I mean that in the best sense. It's not normal to be at a major club in this day and age that long. It's just not. It takes a particularly special type of coach and manager to deal with that, and Klopp's obviously leaving it in the season because he himself says he just doesn't have the energy to do it anymore. So they could get a manager in and he does really, really well, but 2 years is all he needs. The problem they've had is all the managers they've had have all been wildly different characters with wildly different playing styles or desires, and allied that with abysmal recruitment, and the result is mayhem. And whereas if you have a very, very clear way of playing, which is I think one thing that they will impose, they'll be very clear on what sort of football they want to play going forward. And I don't just mean Man United attacking football. I mean, it doesn't mean anything. I'm talking very specifically about what they want, and then they will hire according to that.
Yeah.
And then they will sign players according really to obviously that sort of, model. And that doesn't mean you're going to be successful, but you are reducing the threat of repeat mistakes. And speak to any sporting director and they will say to you, a lot of it is about minimising your mistakes. You're going to get things wrong, but the sporting director in the club that make the fewest mistakes in the transfer market are often the most successful.
I think you mentioned that's the setup and the structure, and managers not necessarily staying there too long. I know they've got other sorts of issues, but I think Barcelona's a good example of that. So in the last sort of 15, 20 years, they've won the league about 12 times. And in that time, no manager stayed there, as far as I can think, for more than 3 years. They've won 3 or 4 Champions Leagues in that time, endless Copa del Reys. They've been as successful as Real Madrid, if not more so. And they've had probably close to 8 or 9 managers in that time. So it's not as though they've had one person stay there for 9 years like City's done or like Liverpool have done.
Amid financial...
Yeah, and they've had obviously loads of crap going on, but they've been wildly successful with new manager. So maybe that's what United are thinking.
Yeah, and I think I'm often loath really to compare the Premier League though to any other league now because it's so far in a way the dominant league in Europe and it's so hard to win. So I think Barcelona could have been a bit of a basket case in certain ways, and they've still got a good chance of winning it because it's really them or Real Madrid, and occasionally again Atletico Madrid or this season in Girona doing well. But yeah, I think if you've got a good strike rate in the window, and you know what you are and you know how you want to play and you hire to that, there's always going to be variations of it. So I mean, when Guardiola goes, no one's going to be identical Guardiola, but if a Zerbi, for example, went in there, you'd say that would be quite a good fit, wouldn't you? You'd say it's not. There might be changes, but it's not going to be a wild detour from what they've had before, and that he'll inherit players that will obviously fit quite well with him. Whereas United just hasn't obviously been like that, and then add to that the fact that players. The new managers are looking at the players thinking,
it's right because you mentioned the window. When you look at for so many years, Chelsea's method works. It was crazy and it shouldn't have done, but it did, and a lot of that was because they got some good signings in. They had a good squad and they bought good players. And
good players can always be shaped.
Yeah, and so if you've got a Conte or you've got a Jose Mourinho or you've got even a Di Matteo won the Champions League there, when you've got an N'Golo Kante or you've got an Hazard there. It's so much easier than if you've got almost no one.
Yeah.
Or you're looking at your squad and you're going, I haven't really got any world-class players there. Then it's just going to be such a nightmare. One player you've written about recently, he's had his critics over the season, especially in the Champions League, but you've been singing his praises quite a lot recently, haven't you, as well? He's Andre Onana. What's your take on him? Because I wanted him. I'll be honest with you. We were sort of, quite impressed when we got him. I thought that makes sense to me. Had a difficult start, had that horrible Champions League campaign, but I think in the league it's shown signs now of what he's about. What do you make of that signing? What do you make of him?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was in Istanbul in June, and he was outstanding in that game. I mean, he was really good. I mean, you could see City really thinking, how are we pressing in this game? He was superb with his feet, but he made some really big saves, in that game. And then this year, look, I think for any sort of goalkeeper coming into that, I mean, that is one of the most scrutinised positions in Europe, isn't it? I mean, it's a pretty awful place to be when it's going badly. Yeah. So I think he came into a back four that was constantly this, and this is where I do have sympathy with the injuries. Is I think particularly for a new goalkeeper coming into a new league like that, and an absolute frenetic one, that to play in front of a back four that is constantly changing, that can't have been easy. And then I also think that I don't think United are. I watched them and they don't look to me like a team that spent a lot of time working on the training ground. They probably do, but they don't look to me like a team that work on the training ground a lot in terms of that build up from the back. Whereas, say, I know we've talked about Brighton a lot, but they do. And if you listen to someone like Lewis Dunk talk, and he'll talk for ages about this, he says, we spent hours and hours. He says, I can receive the ball in almost any position because I've been through it on the training ground meticulously. I know how and where my body shape should be. I know where all my teammates are because we literally were drilled into an inch of our lives on it all the time. And they're a great construct in that, and obviously got all the flaws and stuff, but they're very good there. I watch United, and often it just looks chaotic playing out from the back. So
especially we almost get exposed the most against Brighton as well, funnily enough. They're a team that has our number every time we play them, and they look better drilled. And
and I think there's a lot of teams that, I mean, if you look at how Fulham built out from the back, and they broke that press, and then they're gone. So there's a lot. I think there's a lot of teams that look more organised, sort of playing out from the back. So I think it's been a bit of a perfect storm really for Onana. I think like the team construct, all the injuries, the team then starting the season badly, not scoring goals, huge pressure obviously on the defence, team obviously being exposed. Not really an easy situation for any player to go. Now, some of his mistakes were very poor. At times he looked quite an unorthodox goalkeeper. You know, he's sort of just the way he was set, his positioning at times. Just speaking to sort of goalkeepers about that, a bit unusual. But if your confidence is on the floor, which it obviously was, it can wreak havoc. And then he's had things like obviously the whole strange situation around Cameroon, and you've got to understand for a high-profile sort of African player like that, you know, big, huge, sort of contentious sort of story in his home country, and I don't think things like that helped. And then he's like he had the will he go, will he stay for the whole African nations, and that was all a very strange sort of situation. So I don't think it's been an easy predicament for him at all, and I do think it says a lot for him that he's actually come through that quite strongly. I mean, I don't know if he's going to be the right man or if he's good enough sort of long term, but I think it does augur quite well for it. Yeah. I think it is encouraging that it doesn't appear to have broken him that. And I say the same here for someone like Rasmus Hojlund, who 20-year-old striker coming in, I felt was set up to fail by the football club. And
in what sense?
Well, you're a 20-year-old striker who's played fewer than 90 senior games, and you never played in one of, you've not even played in the Premier League before, and you come in and leading the line is on you and you alone. I mean, when you phrase it like that, yeah. And I mean, Anthony Martial is your understudy. Anthony Martial averages fewer than 17 Premier League starts over 9 years. So how can you go into a season thinking that Anthony Martial is going to be able to adequately support that striker? So Wayne Rooney had Carlos Tevez, Cristiano Ronaldo, but Dimitar Berbatov. Wayne Rooney, like, I mean, that United at their absolute peak, at the peak of their powers, used to have 4 strikers. They had to sign 2 strikers this summer. So
I was saying, if people were saying, well, you can't, I was like, well, you can, and you've got it.
Yeah, and look, I mean, like how those times during the season, early in the season, where you could have taken Hojlund out, and you'd have had your main man, you could have put him in and out, and then obviously when he's been injured and stuff, you've got your main man, and Hojlund should be in the Garnacho, Mainu situation of being able to be brought in, drafted in, play a bit, take him out when he needs to play. And instead, you've got 3 kids who have actually taken the fight to the opposition for them this season, and huge credit to them. But Hojlund, if he was not such a strong character, who knows what he's going to develop into, but I think it takes a really strong kid to have withstood that in the first 6 months, and come through it like he has, and never got too high, never got too low, and similarly with Onana, who's obviously much more experienced and different, but in the net striker, United centre and the goalkeeper, probably 2 of the most scrutinised positions in world football. I think it says a lot for them both that they've withstood that and come through it for different reasons.
Did you put that to Tanak? Was it you that put it to him about Andy Marshall? There was recently a press conference.
Yeah.
I thought it was you that asked him about that. Sort of, what was the question? It was around Marshall and...
I just sort of...
think he would be an adequate backup?
I just asked him, I said, does he regret? Because this was... The context was Hojlund was ruled out for 2 to 3 weeks at a time when he scored 7 and 6 and was doing well. And Martial was obviously, again, injured, not back till April at the earliest. So they had no centre forward. And my question was, do you not regret? And in fairness, I mean, I was right back in the summer. Why are they not signing 2 strikers? Why are they not signing? Why are they at the absolute least bidding for Harry Kane and at least? And if they don't get Harry Kane, for whatever reason, Tottenham won't sell, fine. But at least you've gone for him. And signed Hojlund. They needed both of them. Yeah. They needed both of them. And he whether he in his hearts knows him right or not, or generally thinks I'm naive, then fine. But I mean, he was the contradictory element is the fact that he then comes out and says in January we're vulnerable in the centre forward position. And my point was, well, you've always been vulnerable because Anthony Martial's your alternative striker, and his starting record in the Premier League is really, really poor. He averages 16.5 starts over 9 years. It's not even anywhere near half the number of Premier League games you play in a season. It's nowhere. It's not good enough. Yeah. So how you can go into a season, and then there's the argument of like, well, he earns a lot of money and he's there. Well, when he came in, he had a ruthless mindset. Where's that gone? You can't base your entire transfer strategy over Anthony Martial's feelings. Yeah. Anthony Martial has had his chance over and over again and has routinely failed to deliver and should have been carted out of the football club a long time ago. He's the second longest serving player at the club after Luke Shaw, when you don't include the academy graduates like the McTominays and Rashfords have been there all their life. The third longest serving is Victor Lindelof. What does that tell you about your club?
It's not legends, is it? It's not, we look back, it would be, even just including their time in the first team, it would be Scholes, Neville, Giggs, Ferdinand, Vidic, players like that. Yeah. And now it's people who, maybe other than Luke Shaw, aren't going to be starting when everyone's fit, let alone, taking United to a title.
Shaw averages about 17.
Even he's a bit of an issue.
Shaw averages
goes
about...
under the radar a little bit. We spoke about it.
He's Shaw, obviously, infinitely better than those 2 other players in terms of what he's achieved when he's been on the pitch, in terms of like Luke Shaw at his best level. Luke Shaw at his best fit is an asset, but he averages 17 Premier League starts per season in the 10 years or so that he's been there. Not good enough. No, so, and this is where, like, say someone like Bruno Fernandes, obviously, frustrates certain people. He plays every 3 days.
Yeah,
he is there every 3 days. I mean, he was injured this week and he's still playing. Like, and the best are available. The best are available. I mean, Rodri plays every game at a ridiculously high level for the best team, playing in the biggest games all the time. It's like 60 games a season. He's never there. The only time he's missing is if he's suspended.
Part of that. On one hand, you think, well, that's because best players don't get injured. But I think the truth of the matter is, you can't be a top player if you're always getting injured. That's the actual truth of it. One of the reasons why Ronaldo and Messi are the way they are, yes, they're as talented, but are they any more naturally talented than R9 or players of that kind of calibre? Maybe a little bit, but the mentality and the fact that they never get injured.
And they look after themselves.
They miss 50 games in their whole career, not 25 games a season like we've seen from some of our players.
It's a huge issue for United, is that not only do they sign square pegs in round holes all the time. I mean, they sign Jadon Sancho apparently as a right winger, but then all the talk was, well, Jadon Sancho prefers playing on the left. They then sign another right winger in Anthony. They've spent 150, 160 million on right wingers, both of whom need to be sold this summer. I mean, it's absolutely implausible that you can operate like that.
Just on summer then, because obviously And we've kind of got this weird thing where, yes, we don't really have a head of recruitment, but we're talking to the person, that person. We haven't really got a CEO, but Barada's starting soon. We haven't really got a director of football, but Ashworth's starting soon. What's this summer going to look like? Real Madrid are already like 3/4 of the way to signing Mbappe. You sit here announcing Xavi already, which again, the wheels couldn't be more greased there if they tried, but they're still getting deals done. We're in March. We don't know who our manager's going to be. We don't know who's going to be in the room negotiating transfers. By the sound of it, they don't really know what the budget's going to be because they're still banking on getting the quarterfinal of the Champions League, which starts in 2 weeks, and I don't think we're going to be there. Like, what is this summer going to look like, as far as you understand?
I don't know, and I don't think they necessarily know.
They must be shitting it.
But what I would say is that this is not on INEOS. Like, what are they supposed to do? Are they supposed to not make the changes? I mean, if they'd have had their way, that deal would have been rubber stamped long before Christmas Eve. And this is one of the other issues. I mean, yes, the Glazers have at the very least accepted that something has to change, and they've gone, there you go, Sir Jim. But really, I mean, why that deal couldn't have been, say signed, sealed and delivered in September. And if that had been the case, it would be a totally different situation now. So the time that was wasted there, well, they've chosen the words carefully, but I suspect it was probably a source of great frustration for them because it was valuable time that was being lost. And it's not like going into a shop and buying a packet of fruit pastels and you take them away there and then. If you want to get good people out, well, there's a reason that embedded in their contracts are long notice periods.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, Newcastle losing Dan Ashworth, you can understand why Eddie Howe is concerned about it, because he's taking all their secrets with him. And he'll have done tremendous sort of work on this window, and he'll be very, very well versed in what they were doing, but just in the market generally. So I think they'll have a lot of expertise there already, and they'll have a lot of know-how. How much they're permitted to do, how much they're allowed to do, I don't know. It's going to be difficult, and obviously they've got to get those people in. There's obviously got a decision over the manager, and they've obviously got all the financial questions. Have they got a Champions League budget? Do they not? What's the PSR going to look like? How many players can we realistically get out in a summer? What's it going to cost us? Do we realistically know what we're going to be able to get for Casemiro or a Varane? Well, obviously Varane could be out of contract, obviously, like Anthony Martial. So there's a lot of unknowns, and I think they'll have to be quite nimble and agile. I think one of the critical things is not making more mistakes for those that they do bring in. I think if they are going to bring someone in for a substantial amount of money, they really, really will have to make sure that it's right. And I mean, look, I'm absolutely not saying that they're signing these players. And I think there's obviously a lot to be worked through given who's coming in. But just say you take a couple of Crystal Palace players. Say you look at Mark Gahey and Michael Elise. I mean, what would they cost? I mean, probably cost 100 to 120 million for the two of them.
Yeah. Now, I think around 50 million-ish.
Yeah. So say it's 100 million quid. Well, I'm not sure United's budget would be 100 million quid, sort of in gross terms. So they'll have to sell. But two players alone scratch the surface, does it, in terms of what they need? But I think this is where they're going to have to be pretty pragmatic. I think fans are going to have to be realistic that this is going to take some time. I might look at it and just think, well, gonna need minimum 2 windows, really 3, to sort of really reshape the sort of squad. But also, I think what they have done is they've carried these hugely bloated squads, and obviously Solskjaer's been talking, hasn't he, on Gary Neville's sort of Stick to Football podcast about how the squad was too big and various other things. Well, why didn't you clear players out? I mean, this is one thing I've never understood. Like, why have they not literally, if there's one thing to throw your toys out of the pram about, it's about kicking and screaming to get players out the door. And this summer they have to do that, and they've carried these hugely bloated squads. If you actually look at City, I think they've got maybe 20 players, including both goalkeepers. And you can operate with that. I'd prefer United to sort of run with a much leaner squad, and at times, you have to lean on a kid or two. But at least you've not got dissenting voices in the dressing room. You've not got players that go stale and disillusioned. You've not got players that are hogging the wage bill who've been there for donkey's years who don't deserve to be there.
Yeah.
You've got a hungry, motivated sort of group. And you could, there are injuries and stuff, you could come a bit unstuck and stuff. But I think the gains are greater. And look, if you're not in Europe, if United aren't in Europe, they don't have to run with as big a squad, But, I say that, I mean, they've had one game a week now for most of the time since January, still getting loads of injuries. I don't...
Still getting more injuries than pretty much anyone else in the league somehow.
Yeah.
And Malacia and Mason Mount, as far as I'm concerned, don't exist.
I almost forgot about Mason Mount. It was a big signing for us.
The Mount things, for me, the Mount thing is for me is one of the best examples of a completely flawed recruitment policy. So he did his best work at Chelsea when he won the Champions League and was player of the year on the right front three. He was signed as a number 8 midfielder. Now, Liverpool fancied him in that role, and I think Arsenal looked him in that role. And in a highly functioning setup like that, you could probably see it working. But a gamble, I think, to bring in a player like that, United, who is not played in that position, and go for it. The second point and the main issue is that the 60 million spent on him, for me, should have been spent on another striker.
Yeah.
They had, whether you like the configuration of United's midfield or not, there was a lot of midfielders. There was absolutely nothing in the centre forward position. So they needed 2 strikers. So there's an issue there. And then the third issue, and you've seen this with a lot of players, is he had a poor injury record for a good couple of years. His last couple of years has been a lot of injuries. You actually look back, he had a lot of absences at Chelsea. And they brought him in, and lo and behold, he's had 2 big injuries, and no one knows when he's going to be back. So on sort of 3 levels, that transfer doesn't make sense. And I'm not saying that means that he's never going to do anything for United or that he's not a good player, but it's just not that much of a surprise that they've run into trouble with it. And it's so what they can't do this summer is they can't sign. Whoever they bring in has got to really clearly address a majorly pressing issue or shortage, and there needs to be complete clarity over what he will bring, what he's expected to bring, and what they want for that position. And I think if they can start to do that, and the calibre of player and character they bring in is better, then they will improve as a team, no doubt. They just will, but they haven't got anywhere near that for a while.
Other than that, it's all looking well. I mean, you're right. It's the Mount one, and this happens a lot as a fan. You try and buy into it. You always get behind players, but we're all questioning it. Bit of a strange one. That okay, fair enough. Won a Champions League, good player. So right, yeah, get behind it. And then he's just been injured, and also I know other teams were in for him, so maybe they felt like they had to move, but he was out of contract in the year, and he's not played during that year as well, which just adds to the frustration, because then you're looking at it, you're going, we went early with him, spent 60 million, and he's just done nothing.
I mean, Mount signing for Arsenal, Liverpool made sense because you could see him playing in Klopp's midfield as one of the 8s. You could see him playing in Arteta, in the Havertz position.
Yeah, 100%.
You could see that. But they are much further ahead in their development. It's fine tuning and various other things. They're further ahead in their development. He might have been a player that, down the line would have been right for United, but I think there were much more pressing issues and pressing needs. And were they blinded by the fact that it's an England international and the last year of his contract and we can get him for 55 million, and Liverpool and Arsenal want him, rather than stepping back and thinking, good player, would in another time make a lot of sense, but at this moment, no, it's not quite right. But they're not done that, and it's not worked.
I think another thing that, personally, looking from the outside in, I think may have played on their mind is they spent all the summer of the year before going Frenkie de Jong, shit. And then they went, we can get Mount now, and it's June.
Yeah.
So they went, well, let's just box that off, because then at least we've got a midfielder who can pass a little bit. He's not Frenkie de Jong, but maybe Ten Hag can turn him into that. And look, we don't have to wait till August. I think they were sort of lured in by how easy and how early it was to get him, especially as a reflection of the season before, or in contrast to the season before, where they were so heavily scrutinised for waiting till we got battered by Brentford and Brighton to sign Anthony and Casemiro.
I totally agree, Joe. I mean, if you actually look at the two summers and what's happened. So the first summer, sort of 4 criteria. We won't be held to ransom. We won't sign dickheads. That was the sort of the internal policy. We will only pursue players who want to come, and we won't give big contracts to 30-somethings. We won't pursue. Well, they pursued a player who didn't want to come, Frenkie de Jong, for 14 weeks. And then in turn, because obviously, and that's on Ten Hag, I think it's twofold. One, it was Ten Hag insisting, no. Let's keep going for him. And two, they're not having the hierarchy and the expertise there to turn around and say, this player does not want to come to the football club. We are not pursuing it. And in the right setup, that I said from the outset, it's very clear from all the due diligence we've done, he's not come in, so we're not even pursuing it.
Yeah.
Or they might have done it for a couple of weeks and said, it's not happening, Erik, we're moving on. Instead, United didn't stand up to the manager, and by the start of August, they're like, right, we've been keeping Casemiro warm since the end of June. We're now going to have to push the button on this. The problem was, they ended up going for Casemiro at a time where they started the season catastrophically. Real Madrid probably had another 20 million onto the price. And you end up then doing one of the things that you said you wouldn't do, which is signing a 30-something on huge money for a huge fee. Won't sign any dickheads. Well, they tried to sign Arnautovic, and obviously until there was a fan backlash, and there was a pursuit of Rabiot, and obviously been a lot of questions about him in certain dressing rooms. And then we won't be held to ransom. Well, they valued Anthony at the same fee as Rafinha, 55 million, which was already toppy. And then ended up paying 85 million for him. What well-run football club who values a player at 55 million tops then subsequently pays 85 million for him? Can you imagine Liverpool, what Man United or the current Arsenal doing that? No chance. Not in a million years would that happen. So that was that summer. This summer, they spent 47 million on a goalkeeper who they could have had as a free transfer 12 months earlier, who had also played on the Ten Hag.
I forgot he went to Inter for free.
Yeah, the Mount thing we've discussed.
Yeah.
Money redirected on a midfielder where it should have gone to a striker who had a suspect injury record and played in a position where he hadn't thrived, probably been better suited at another club. And then Hojlund, again, who would have been available, who... Can't understand why they didn't get him in straight away. They could have got that deal done in May, June, for some reason. Which says to me, did they have other things that they were obviously looking at? But anyway, we got him in August late. He was injured when he arrived, and ended up paying an absolutely colossal fee for a guy with fewer than 90 senior starts. If they'd done that deal earlier in the year, would it have been anything like that price? I don't know. So both windows, and then obviously sign Amrabat on loan late in the window as well. I mean, both windows have been so sort of deeply flawed. So I think it's things like that, isn't it? That you've got recruitment specialists making smart, shrewd decisions, manager input, but the manager not calling the shots. And if the manager wants something and it's daft, or it's going too far, you've got people who are strong enough and empowered enough to stand up to him and say, sorry. And the weird thing about United, the penny pinching and stuff that goes on in certain areas, is baffling to so many staff when they see things like the Anthony deal happening. I mean, that deal is just so negligent. And then again, they weren't aware that there was actually. And listen, some of these things are easier to find out than others, and they were not happy with me writing about it. But there was a police report from the Sao Paulo Civil Police there in the May or June of that summer, 3 months before they signed him, but they were unaware of it in their due diligence. Similarly, like when we signed Marcus Rocco, they were unaware that he was accused of assaulting a neighbour, and there was a police investigation going on there. So things do slip through the net. It is easy in hindsight. Some of these things are far, far harder to find out than you would actually think, and maybe in the Anthony case that would be. But it's not a. Every
transfer you went to just gets worse.
Yeah, it's not. But I just think and then if you look across the road, and their strike rate, look at the sort of, aside from the sort of, they're very, very clear in what they want, the profile of player, very, very clear, and they're absolutely adamant about what their job they can do. But look at the characters, like, if you spent time with like Rodri, De Bruyne, Gundogan's obviously now gone, Kovacic, in a room, you'd be like, I mean, like, these are together people, they really, Haaland's the same, Ruben Diaz, I mean, like, unbelievable professional, John Stones, like, and even some of those who have said there's a really, really good in the dressing room, and I think that's where, like, it must be difficult for your Fernandes of this world, that dire final season of Solskjaer and Rangnick. I mean, like, Bruno did so much work to try and keep that dressing room together, and it must be hard, I think, for the good characters in the dressing room to see some of the other individuals in there, and some of the attitudes and the work rate and the approach to life and their jobs. So this is why this has to be a ruthless summer, and they have to, used to be that you'd sign a right back for 10 million quid and he went wrong week, get another week. A right back now costs you 50 million quid.
Yeah. It snowballs as well, doesn't it? Because if you look at City, like, their transfers, there've been a few misses. I mean, overall, I think what Grealish did last season was hugely helpful in the treble season, but this is his third season now, and the first one I think he was underwhelming, and this one he's been, underplaying, let alone underwhelming. But then you look at some other ones, like Calvin Phillips, obviously just didn't work out. But certain players, like if we go back to Grealish, that first year he was allowed to sort of come into the team, learn what Pep wanted, and then he played loads of games last season and was hugely helpful for him. This season, Gvardiol's barely playing. What's his name? Mateus Nunes is barely playing, but you still wouldn't rule them out as a failure, because we saw what happened with John Stones, you saw what happened with Grealish. Like, this can happen where it takes a season or two, and because the rest of the squad's working, like I said, that snowball effect of we're operating at this level, so it might take you a while to get to that, but you're allowed that time to get there. Whereas, like I mentioned with Hojlund, if you're not good enough, well, it's too late. You have to start every game for us because you're our only striker. Yeah. Imagine Hojlund was at City this season. He'd look amazing, because he'd come in, he'd probably get the same number of goals or more as he's got now, but he wouldn't have been like, you're our only striker for the biggest team in the world.
For them, innit? Like, Alvarez comes in, plays a certain amount of games, is rested for others, does really well. His goal scoring record is very, his ratio is very good, and he obviously, he fits in well with them.
And if they wanted to sell him now, they'd probably get between 70 and 100 million for Alvarez. Was it 20 million euros?
14.
So it was
million pounds, yeah.
So it wasn't like they went out and spent it.
City are operating in a virtuous circle. United are operating in a vicious circle.
Yeah.
And I mean, you are right. I mean, I think a lot of players take a season at City to sort of fully adjust, and often those first seasons are decent, but maybe not spectacular, and then the second season you see them, really, really come to the fore. Bernardo's a good example. Grealish was superb last season. Mahrez, was obviously like that, and then they rise. But I mean, the team evolves and it changes quite a lot. There's all these little alterations he makes. But you're right. I mean, but I think someone like Kovacic sort of is a good squad player to come in there. The price was like 25 million, perfect really. He's never gonna. Is he going to be Ilkay Gundogan? No, but is he going to be able to do a fairly decent job for you? Yeah. Núñez is a sort of a luxury buy that really could sort of develop in time. Not had that much opportunity now, but will be good. I mean, Guardiola, I think, superb. Has obviously played out currently with an injury, but has been pretty good when he has played. 21, but probably ended up being an absolute world beater. But yeah, they and the thing is, you're coming into a dressing room, you're coming into a team with De Bruyne, Rodri, Phil Foden, Haaland, Ruben Diaz, John Stones, Kyle Walker, Edison. So you've got
similar to ours, really.
Yeah, I mean, is there a difference really there?
Heavy hitters. So you sort of, but I know it's obviously frustrating for United fans on the City talk, and look, there's a whole other set of issues, obviously, off the pitch that be very interesting, could yet play into INEOS's hands. But this was what every other club used to have to deal with when United were on top. They are the benchmark. How do we unseat them? And this is obviously the shoes on the other foot now. And I never believed in and I think this is one thing that has been nice with INEOS, is that they accept City are the benchmark and the best, and they don't hide from that. They're not afraid to say. And I can understand when it was with Moyes and he's getting berated for it, because just soon after Ferguson,
we were reigning champions at the time.
Exactly.
It hasn't been 10 years of dominance.
Exactly. Very good for me. So, but they are obviously the benchmark, and they've got there's things that can obviously learn from. Doesn't mean you do it exactly the City way, but it's. The one thing that is amazing about United is once it gets going, it is an absolute juggernaut.
This is what I always say. This is what me and my dad say when we're chatting. The one thing that keeps me going is that when you start moving in the right direction, the momentum, the fans, the excitement, and just almost like anger that's going to come out as sort of positivity, things really could just
the rest
fly.
Of the Premier League in Europe have been literally just thinking, please carry on the way you're doing, Man United. Please carry on the way you're doing, because obviously your Liverpool and your Cities are there, but for your Arsenals and your Tottenhams and now your Villas and Newcastles, you're thinking, please carry on doing it, because we've got a chance of taking one of those spots that would always be a Man United spot. Otherwise, they'll be looking at it thinking, Barada's coming in at Ashworth, right? Actually, this lot look like they could be mobilising, and we might have a bit of a window, but if they get some momentum, well, I mean, like you say, look at the Fulham game at the end. I mean, it was the team were awful on the day, but you could see Fulham thinking, even the team playing so poorly, the Stretford end got up, the crowd got up, and it was a chaotic sort of form of the last 10 minutes. But if you actually have a cohesion and a sense for that, it is a really powerful sort of tool. And I think if they're, as difficult as it is, and as much as things can snowball in the opposite way very quickly, it can gather momentum. And even like sort of last season, that first, after the difficult start, it did gather some momentum. And suddenly, they beat City at Old Trafford, and actually compare that performance to the one on Sunday, like night and day. They win the Carabao Cup, and ironically, obviously since then it's been pretty poor. But there was momentum, and when the club gets its tail up, it is a force. It just is. It's a brute, isn't it? Really, so I think you start to make some smart decisions on players. You have a ruthless mindset, and I don't mean you like. There's not a compassion at times to what you do, because but don't be scared of making tough decisions and putting some noses out of joint, and not making the same mistakes again. I think they will get back there, but it's how long they do. And the history of the club is glorious Busby era, 2 decades, 25 years of a few cup wins in optimism here and there, but really nothing sustained. And then there's the Fergie empire, and then we're 11 years now without a title, and history is sort of repeating itself. But you know, the most literally substantive, meaningful change that they've had really since Ferguson's departed is what is now happening, and they've got a big job on their hands. But it is meaningful change. It is tangible. It's the first. I think you can see why fans are disillusioned, but you could also see why, you know what, that gives me a bit more hope for the future.
Definitely. As Barack Obama said, it's change you can believe in. This could be it. We'll have to wait and see. James, it's always a pleasure chatting to you. Obviously, I've covered loads of stuff there. Really enjoyed that.
Yep.
And always a pleasure chatting to you as well.
Thank you very much.
Go and check out James Ducker at the Telegraph. There's a link in the description. Loads of good stuff there covering not just United, but if you've got to cover, I'll have a look at what's going on down the road, because you spoke about them quite a lot, then you can check that out too. I've been Jay Motti, that's been James Ducker from the Telegraph, that's been Joe Smith. This has been the Tier 1 podcast. Don't forget to hit like, share and subscribe. Thanks for watching.